So I'm Cory Powell. I am director within the Office of Institutional Diversity, specifically working with community or outreach, community partnerships, special events, special initiatives for the division. In 2000, I was hired to work in the Office of Cultural Diversity, which was a system office. So my boss was Vice Chancellor, reported directly to the Chancellor. At the time, the system was very new. The system was birthed 1996, 97. And so at that time, the university did a really good job of recruiting, the job of retention, particularly of those of underrepresented populations, was where there was some lack. So our office was charged with helping to increase the recruitment and retention efforts of students from underrepresented populations, primarily Black and Hispanic. In the early 2000s, we brought in some students from Jack Yates High School, which is inner city Houston, and recruited them heavily, almost like athletics recruits. These is all based on academics and the school and their academic abilities and the progress and promise that they showed. And so from those students, we brought in 9, and of the 9, 4 actually enrolled in tech, came in, and they stayed here basically a semester, and then they one by one started going. And then we did a campus climate survey and realized that there, kind of assessed why students would leave. And we had conversations and realized there were basically 4 reasons students say that they would leave the university. They couldn't afford to stay, they didn't feel academically supported or prepared. They didn't like Lubbock, and they didn't feel welcomed on the campus. And so we literally were thinking of how could we assist in addressing those issues. I attended a conference at Dartmouth, and then on the way back in, one of my colleagues and I had stopped at Boston College to learn about a Ford Foundation grant that they received. In the process of talking to them about that grant, we learned of the program they had there called the Benjamin E. Mays Mentoring Program. Dr. Mays was the mentor to Martin Luther King Jr. So that program was named after Benjamin E. Mays because of his mentorship. I tucked it away in my head, and that was it. I had a flyer and a brochure and came back. As we were talking about things that we could do here on campus, I was like, man, maybe that's something we could eventually do. I was having a conversation with a colleague who worked in athletics. She's from Mississippi. I'm from San Antonio. I came to Tech as a student and never left. She came in specifically and solely to work at the university. But by the time we were having this conversation, she was sharing with me her plans and desires to leave because she didn't feel Lubbock and Tech was good for her, and how hard it was as a Black woman coming from her background to make it here at Tech. And in the process, we thought, man, wouldn't it have been nice if when you first got here, somebody kind of took you by the hand and showed you the ropes and kind of helped you. And full transparency, our initial plans was to have a faculty staff mentoring program for faculty staff, just to help with the adjustment. But then as we were working through the initial thoughts and plans and building what would be the skeleton of the program, we had this kind of epiphany that if we felt like that and we are paid to be here, how about the people who are paying to be here? And then that triggered my memory of the Boston College program, that triggered my thoughts and recollection of what we were charged with in helping to address those needs and gaps. And from that, we said, let's propose this program. So initially, we sat down and had conversations about a faculty mentoring program to work faculty staff, just for us. Then it morphed into, let's do this for the students. So we scoured and searched across the country of universities and found a handful of mentoring programs and kind of took from everyone what we felt would best work here. We proposed it and we were told no. And as I said, I worked for the system, and so my boss's boss was like a vice chancellor, senior vice chancellor, but he also was the CFO of the system. And so I was like, when I told my colleague Felicia Martin, who now works for the NCAA, I said to Felicia, I said, we tried. And she's like, no, that's not good enough. This is a good idea. We need to do this. And I get the credit because I ran the program and so forth. And she went on and did other things. But literally, Mentor Tech happened because she refused to accept the no. She was insistent. And I was like, but this man actually, like, you get a paper check back in the day. His name was actually on the check. Like, he signs our checks, right? So I'm not in any way, form, or fashion desiring to rock the boat. But her idea was great. And so we went back and said, why? So they told us the reasons they were concerned. So we went back and revised and resubmitted our proposal, and we were granted permission, because we started this in the summer 2002, and we didn't get permission until well into the fall. But late November, we proposed. We went through the process and we launched the program. And our goal was to have 100 mentors, 100 students. We had 100 mentors, more than 100 people, faculty and staff, that said they wanted to do it. We only had 46 students sign up. And we were devastated because we were like, this is such a great idea. And and rather than becoming discouraged, we made the decision, let's just go forward with these 46. And so we launched it with 46 students, and that was the best thing. I always tell those who are interested in starting groups, organizations, don't despise the days of small beginnings, because those 46 taught us a lot. And that first year we had a few programs, a few get-togethers, some of the staples that are there with the program, with the annual spring fling, a picnic or whatnot. We did that. We did, holiday, social, some basic things, but it was really, really small. But those students connected well with the program and refused to leave. So our goal was 1 year. We serve you for a year. After that year, you're adjusted, you're good. You go on and you go forward, and we get a new group of students, and it was just going to be a 1 year program. But at the end of that first year, the students were like, this is home for us. Y'all can't just drop us. Like, what are we going to do? And so we had to revise our plans, and our funds were our office was, the Office of Cultural Diversity was underwriting, all of everything. That first year we were just begging people, like, can we do this? Can we, we had no budget. Like, when they give you an idea, it's a pilot, they're like, yeah, go for it, but they give you no funds. And so at the end of that first year, we had success, and we looked and we saw the retention rate of those students was like 89, 90%. And so we were able to go back to the system administration and say, this is working. And they gave us $25,000. And they said, go forward. And so for many years, we operated with $25,000. But fortunately, we were being underwritten as far as operation salary and things of that nature by Vice Chancellor Kathy Allen and the Office of Cultural Diversity. And so all of that $25,000 was being turned around into programming for our students. And then we did that for a number of years, and it really morphed from 46 students that first year to 154 the next year, and kept going until the point that we had, like over 1,100 people in the program on an annual basis. The challenges were morphing constantly, and there was always some change. Something happened every year, like, staffing change, reportings change, like the program actually moved from the system side to the president's side, like all of these changes every year, but we continued to grow, and the momentum continued. And so, there were multiple challenges along the way, but I think the greatest, like, they fade in my memory because the successes of those students were what we really worked for. We realized, one, that we couldn't offer the same thing again. And so we had to add to every year we added new things to the schedule, to the programming. And so we were on an annual basis putting on about 60 events. We created a structure where students had to attend a certain number of academic and social events. We had at least one social event every month. It was important for us that this was an academic program. There was a misnomer that this was a social thing because they had fun. but they were learning. So we had like pure social events, one per month. We'd go bowling, we'd go skating, we'd have costume party, we'd have the spring fling picnic, we'd have things of that nature. But the bulk of it was academic, like everything else was academic. So if you look at 60 programs, over the course of the year, 8 of those were social. And so we looked at assisting students in their academic, social, and cultural adjustments. Because some students come in and they have the academics down, but they don't know how to interact with each other. Some of them, for the first time, are in the minority, right? Because they grew up in inner city schools and went to inner city communities, predominantly minority communities, and they come to tech. It's a different shift. So for a kid coming from inner city Houston coming to Texas Tech, it's like going from Lubbock to New York City. It's a whole different world. And so being able to meet students where they are, and giving them the options to select. So we intentionally let them choose the type of mentor they wanted, tell us what they wanted, and we allowed them to rank it. And so we went through many iterations of the application process, many iterations of orientation, because we wanted the students to start the year with with their mentor. So our orientation was always prior to the beginning of the school year. So when you started this first day of class, you had a mentor already. That was an adjustment. Recognizing that the needs of students constantly change. So what you needed as a freshman changed. And one of the biggest things that happened was we instituted, that second year, we instituted what PAC, the Protege Advisory Committee, specifically for our students to tell us, because the first year we'd have events and we'd always have tea. They never drank the tea. And then we learned we don't like tea. We don't want to have to sweeten the tea. So we moved away from tea, like some small minor things. I think the strength of Mentor Tech historically was that we responded to the needs of our participants. And so we always had some underlying theories and basis of why we were doing what we were doing. But it wasn't the thing, because the students didn't care. They just wanted, are you there for me? Can I count on you? Can I come to you when I have needs? We would partner with our academic support unit, and I would sit down with the director of that, and we would go through all of the students who fell below 2.0 and look at their schedules and look at their things to find out why they failed. What could we have done to help them? And we discovered very early on that there were students who were getting into courses that were reading intensive, though their reading scores were not that great coming in, or they're taking too many reading intensive classes at the same time. And so we started instituting workshops that were specifically designed with learning styles, like knowing your learning style, because a lot of students would say to us, I didn't have to study in high school. And so we would present programs. So literally we went through like this Protege Academic Success series, like learning styles, interacting with your faculty, time management. We would give them a planner, and then we realized we gave them a planner, but we didn't teach them how to use a planner. So then we started having a how to use your planner workshop. We get a planner, and the students would line up because that was their thing. Like, I have to have my planner, I have to have a planner. And we would give them, incentives at events, like pull out your planner. Everybody has a planner. Your name gets entered into the thing to show them you should have it with you all the time. It was creating the culture, branding the organization, explaining to people that being in Mentor Tech did not mean that they couldn't be in their activities in their colleges, that we were really an asset to their academics. And then once the colleges started seeing that, they started supporting us and begging us, coming to us like, how can we support you? Versus in the beginning when we were like, please help us, they were like, how can we help you? Those were some of the challenges early on. Staffing was always a challenge because when you're operating with $25,000, and I was a staff of one for a long time. And so the Protege Advisory Committee morphed, because they would meet with us and tell us what they wanted and ideas, and they would help us come up with new ideas for plannings and programs, and they would have those interactions with the students to tell us what was going on within the Protege. The Mentor Cluster Group kind of evolved organically, because there were mentors that were getting together on their own to do things with their proteges. They get together and they work together, and that morphed into us having the mentor cluster leaders. So students were matched in cohorts based on their majors. The mentors were matched in clusters based on the majors of their students. And so you could be matched with someone based on based on academics or hobbies or culture or any of the other things that we'd allow them to rank. But we still wanted to make sure that they had that academic support that they needed. So within that cluster, there was somebody who was a professor in that. And one time we had a group of students who were all having trouble with a particular science class. And the mentors in their mentor cluster meeting were like talking about, this class, da 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 da. And one of the mentors raised his hand and was like, do you know what section it was? And so they reached out to the students and, or somebody, oh yes, this section. He's like, I teach that. That was helpful because he did not know how hard he just saw the students' grades, but he didn't know why they were not getting it. And so the information exchange through their mentor cluster, through that cluster, helped him to understand, but also helped him to share with the mentors what the students needed to do differently to be successful. So we built this culture of mentoring. We'd have t-shirt days where, everybody in the program would get a t-shirt. And you'd see all these shirts and people would be asking, like, that's a cool shirt. How do I get that shirt? You gotta come to Mentor Tech. For the mentors who were faculty members or staff members who couldn't wear a t-shirt to work, we had lapel pins. So if you're in this class, you see others in the class that are in the program, y'all have some commonalities. You're not alone. You see that lapel pin on that professor's jacket or on the blouse, then they know something about your experience. And so it created this culture that grew, and every year we would have a waiting list of students. We always had, and you talk about challenges, one of the greatest challenges was having enough mentors. The first year was the only year we had like a surplus of mentors. After that, we always had students on the waiting list. They would come to programs, get involved. They had pack leaders. They just didn't have a mentor because we didn't have enough mentors. So what started out as a program that was part of my job became my full-time job, recruiting students. In the summer, we would plan this fall and recruit our mentors. In the fall, we would plan the spring banquet, right? In the spring, that was the biggest thing every year, raising money for scholarships, because again, one of the reasons students said they would leave was couldn't afford to stay. One of my joys of Mentor Tech was our very first banquet. Ophelia Powell Malone was the first Black to graduate from Tech. She is deceased, but she was, by the time we started, she was already deceased. So I reached out to her brother, who gave me permission to use the name, and I told him about the program. He was so excited, and I said, we're thinking we're going to have an end of the year event. I would love for you to come. And he goes, sure, keep me posted. And so as the program evolved that first year, at the end of the year, we had a banquet, and we did it in the United Supermarkets arena. Back then it was the United Spirit Arena, in the Citibank rooms, and we had about 200 people in attendance. So he came as our keynote speaker, and at the end of his speech, he called me up and he handed me a check, which started the Mentor Tech Scholarship Fund. Totally unexpected. The chancellor was sitting in the audience and beckoned for me and said, did you know he was going to do that? And I said, no. Now, Mr. Powell was well in his 70s at this time. And so the chancellor, David Smith, said, he didn't have to do that. I said, no, I'm glad he did. He said, I'll match it. Everything you raise tonight, I'll match. So I got up, is there another, right? Let's go. And so that night we raised, around $5,000 for student scholarships. And then every year throughout his tenure as chancellor, whatever we raised at the banquet, he matched. So we were able, by the time I left Mentor Tech, we had given out well over $100,000 in student scholarships. So from that first cohort, there's one lady who is now an attorney, who comes back regularly. Like, she came to our Celebrate Diversity banquet, but she would come to Mentor Tech banquet every single year. From wherever she was, she would fly back in because she was like, this helped me get where I'm going. And so she went from buying a seat to buying a table, to being a sponsor, to help other kids, as she said, get what she got. So all of the struggle and the joys certainly outnumber those struggles. When we started the program, we never wanted it to be a one-year program. I mean, we never wanted it just to be, we did it and then it was over. Like, our goal was for it to become a part of the institution, right? And to look back at this place and point to know that we literally helped educate a generation. Like, I've been here long enough to where I've served multiple siblings. I've been here long enough to where there are people who met their spouses in Mentor Tech, to where they're, friends and they brought their relatives and others to come back. And so there's a sense of, I'm very happy we didn't give up, because there were plenty of times where we coulda, shoulda, and thought we would have given up, but we didn't. And so it is a sense of pride to know that even today, that the program still exists, that students are still being assisted through what was just an idea. And it reiterates how important one effort can be. Like, one small attempt can make a massive change. That in the legacy of Laurel Cavazos, who was the first Hispanic person to serve in a presidential cabinet, the first Tech grad to serve in a presidential cabinet, the first alumnus of Tech to become president of the university. To know that I had the privilege of working with him and knowing him personally, and he and his wife came and supported the program, continuing his legacy, the legacy of Ophelia Powell Malone, who had to have had unimaginable struggles being one of a handful of blacks on Texas Tech campus in the early mid-60s. She graduated in 64, and in 79 she passed on. But her brother, for me to be able to meet with him, and he and his wife flew out here multiple times, and became like family, although there was no relation. To know the stories and to hear what it was like from Dr. Cavazos, to know what it must have been like for Ophelia Powell Malone, and to be able to do something that carries on their legacies, continues their efforts, and makes it easier and better for current and future students is I think is one of my greatest professional achievements, to have been part of this. To know that there are students who have earned as many as 4 degrees while participating in this program. To have students who came to Tech and perhaps at a certain point were not ready and went on their way and then come back and earn their degrees. Like, there's so many success stories. And I'm walking in the store and people are calling my name, and I'm turning around and they're like, "You remember me?" And I'm like, "Nah, I was in Mentor Tech." I'll tell you this. My son was in junior high school. We walk into meet the teacher night, and one of his teachers says to me, "I used to be in Mentor Tech." That, and she was explaining how our efforts helped her, and now she was helping my son. That cycle and circle of life, that sharing it and sowing seed. And I think this, and I'm not going to take credit for this because this is not mine. But years ago when I was a kid, there was this preacher that came on television every week. His name is Robert Schuller, Dr. Robert Schuller. And Dr. Schuller would always have some inspirational statement, some phrase, something. And he had this pen that he was offering people. And the pen has this slogan on it. And at the top of the pen is a fake apple seed in water, kind of at the time. But his phrase was, "Anyone can count the the seeds in an apple, but only God can count the apples in the seed. You can count your efforts, but you don't know how much your efforts produces. And so when I reflect on Mentor Tech, it is the fact that our effort was a seed that has created an abundance of fruit, that has created more seed that will create more fruit, and it continues and continues. So I am exceptionally proud when I get Christmas cards from former students, when I get invitations to weddings, when I am asked to be the godparent of one of my former students' child, right? The fact that we have doctors and lawyers and teachers and engineers and people in all walks of life who went through Mentor Tech, and to know that in some small way we helped. And perhaps our help was we just gave them a place to come and eat, or come a place to sit and talk. Some of my former students are social media friends, right? And so they're posting, and I see like, yo, they're like, yeah, we met. We used to take on a city tour. And I remember these two young ladies on that tour talking to one another. Where you from? Where you from? And then they became besties. And they have been in each other's weddings and all of this stuff. And they get together on a regular basis. And when I see those pictures, it gives me joy because I remember when they met. Or those professors and faculty members who tell me being in Mentor Tech was their intention in getting involved in Mentor Tech was to help some underprivileged student, but then they find out that the student actually helped them more than them. They helped them. That they helped them. I will never forget the very first year of Mentor Tech. We'd made this decision that we would have Protege of the Year, Mentor of the Year, Match of the Year, and those would be nominated by those groups. But that we would have an award that we, as the coordinators of the program, would give. And that one would be called the Coordinators Award would be like the person or group or organization that embodies the spirit of Laurel Cavazos and Ophelia Pomalone. And so we would choose that one. And we had a custodial worker who was exceptionally dedicated to her student. And I remember her name, I remember her face. And she was just there, like constantly. Like she would pick up her student and bring her student to events. So she was working like a hourly wage, cleaning like the restrooms, but she was helping a student who was going to college. And so we decided that she was the person. We made up our mind we want to recognize her. So she had told me she wasn't going to be able to come to our banquet because that's where we would recognize. They never knew they were going to be recognized. It was always a surprise. And so I called her supervisor and said, I need her to be there. And I need you to let her be there. And she's getting this award. Don't tell her about it. And so, that person allowed her to come. And when she got on the stage, she was just in tears. She came to my office the following week and she said, I helped her go to school and she's helped me to realize I need to go back. Like I don't think she had her high school diploma, but she was like, I have to go back, right? And so nobody could tell me anything after that. It was like, yes, we are doing this thing. So for me, the joy of knowing that continues, and I hope will continue on, that we're part of this legacy at Texas Tech. And I know for a fact that there are Black, brown, and white students who have graduated from Texas Tech that would not have graduated without Mentor Tech, without the connections, without the resources. That we had students who were headed in one path because they thought that's what they wanted to do, but going to a workshop helped them realize, I don't want to do that. And then the next week they go to the other workshop and they're like, this is my home. The letters of recommendation I've written to help people get into grad school, med school, law school, those are the things that, for me, You know, nothing I've earned here at Tech compares to the joy I know that I helped somebody become who they were intended and purposed to be. What I would say is this: you have been a mentor and you benefited from a mentor, whether you call them a mentor or not. When you move into a new neighborhood and your neighbor comes by and shares some tips that helps you, you've been mentored to some degree. When you start a new job and someone assists you in navigating the system and learning how to do it and helping you become a better person, you're being mentored. So someone who invests in you and takes time with you and helps you reach your full potential, helps you avoid a pitfall, encourages you, pushes you, I think that's what we all have benefited from. So everyone can do that. We specifically designed Mentor Tech not to have a demanding time thing. Like, you got to spend 5 hours together. It was see each other, once a month, face to face, talk on a weekly basis, right? Just communicate. I think that's what our students need, because a lot of students have the ability to do it. They just need to be aware that they have the ability. There are a lot of students who come here because of they always wanted to come to Tech, and there are people who happen to come to Tech. But however they got here, they're here, and we have a responsibility to help them get to there, whatever there is for them. And so for me, it's the least you can do is help somebody else. So you don't have to have a particular expertise. You just have to have the right heart, a desire to help a student. So I have had mentors who would say to me, I'm not the academic. I've had professors who's like, I want to be in the program, but I teach all day. I don't want to help somebody academically. I want to go fishing. I want to go bowling. I want to, help them with navigating. So I have a young man, a former student who graduated, who shared with me very early on in his time at Tech that he wanted to be an attorney, but he had never met a Hispanic attorney. So we matched him with a gentleman at the law school, and that gentleman said to him, I don't have a whole bunch of time. Work is work. I have home life. I can't do a lot, but I play racquetball once a week. Let's meet during that time. And they coordinated it. And the student was like, I don't ever played racquetball. And he's like, I'll teach you. And that became their time. Now, undoubtedly, when they played racquetball, they talked about academics. They talked about life. They talked about that young man is now an attorney. He has his own firm, right? That busy professor spent time with someone doing something he enjoyed, taught the student something he didn't even know he could enjoy. And the student was so excited the day he finally beat him. He was like, I beat him today, right? Those small pockets, those small opportunities are available to all of us. And so to anyone who is interested in being a mentor, I would say, do it. You're needed. You can count the seeds in the apple, but you can't count the apple and the seeds. You never know who you're going to mentor. There's a wonderful book on the bookshelf behind you called A Hand to Guide Me. And Denzel Washington basically pulled this together, and there's a number of celebrities and athletes and individuals who talk about those individuals who mentored them, who helped them along the way. You and I both can imagine what it must be like for someone who served as a mentor to Barack Obama to be able to say, that was my guy. I had a small role, whether that was a teacher or a coach or whoever, someone to say, yeah, I kind of helped that person. I think there are tons of us that can look back on those individuals who helped us along the way, and we're grateful for them. And when they did it, they didn't think, oh, this person's going to go on to be this wonderful. They just were trying to help. So I think, don't think long term in the sense of how much time it's going to take. We just asked for a year. Like, give me a year. Because I was, that's why Mentor Tech, when we sat down and designed it, we purposely designed it to be every year you have to re-up. And as I shared, we had mentors that served all the way 20 years. 18 years, 19 years, 10 years. And And they say, I just thought I was going to do this a year. And the students graduate and move on, and then they start a new group of students. And one of our former mentors he said, I want 2 every year, and I'll only mentor them for a year, because the following year, my expectation is they help me mentor others. And so he had this whole mentor family, and he has students who have gone on to do great things, lawyers and so forth. It starts with a small desire to help. Mentor Tech started with a small desire to help. If you start with that desire and just see what could happen, you'll get far more back in return than you could ever give out. And you will help someone reach a goal they don't even know they have. Simple as that.